This car is the most honest car you ever see.
It's been a dream ever since I've had it.
The first time I heard that engine screaming, I thought, I gotta have one of those.
For me, the cars have personality.
What's great about a BMW Classic is the community that surrounds it.
When you listen to that, that's why we're here.
Welcome to the latest episode of Classic Heart, the BMW Group Classic podcast. My name is JP, and I'm looking very much forward to our conversation today with our guest, Laura Kukuk. She is an absolute genius when it comes to appraisal of vintage cars. Her knowledge is unbeaten, and she is a fellow judge in many, many Concours events. But not only that, she enjoys also driving her vintage Lancia, as well as driving around the world to see fantastic cars. And she will share some insights of her job and her passion for our podcast today. Laura, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very good, and thank you for hosting me today, Philip.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. So we've gone back a bit of history together because you're a joint member at the Villa Desta Concours. You're a member in many other Concours events. But before we jump into all these details, which are now recent, I just have one question. Laura, you grew up into a car-crazy family. Tell us more about your childhood.
Yes, it's all about cars. So my father is a classic car specialist, and I basically grew up in classic cars. So you've once asked me in the past, like, what was my earliest memory with a car? And actually, it's me as a baby in the passenger seat of our early 911, like an F model from 66, and just sleeping, because that's how my dad got me to sleep. So it's basically still today like this. If I'm not driving myself and I feel comfortable, I'm basically asleep on the passenger seat. So yeah, I grew up with classic cars all my life long. I'm driving classics as a daily, and I just don't only like the cars themselves and the technical bits about it, also the people and the community behind it. And to get to talk about the cars like we do with a lot of passion.
Was your father the first one who had this relation to cars, or is there a longer history in the Kukuk family?
We have all been kind of car nuts, but in a different version. So my dad and I are very technical about it. So we're engineers, and we're all about, like, we're totally into the material side of it. Whereas the rest of the family, they really appreciate cars, but it's more about the design and the functionality. But yeah, he grew up working on cars, like, as a really small child in the backyard of my grandparents' house, rebuilding and tuning the little mofas, and like always trying to get more horsepower out of them and this kind of stuff. So yeah.
So tell us more. You live, correct me if I'm wrong, but you live quite not too far away from Nurburgring. Is that true?
Yeah, I basically grew up on Nurburgring. So it's an hour away, like the Eifel from Nurburgring, but it's about an hour drive. And as soon as I was able to drive myself there, I was spending all my free time at the Nurburgring.
What is your earliest memory on Nurburgring? Is there any?
To be fair, it's nothing to do with my father or the... No, it's not true. Okay. Okay, it is actually. The earliest memory with Nurburgring is actually, there is a photo in our house where Weir was a defender at the Nurburgring, and that was back when still F1 was taking place at Nurburgring. And my father used to take us to all the races, so we would camp the whole weekend there. To be fair, I don't really remember the cars, more the whole atmosphere at Nurburgring, because whoever has spent a weekend racing at Nurburgring, you know how it's all about the atmosphere and the stories and the cars which are on the campsites as well as the actual racing going on. So that's probably the earliest memory. But then, like, connected to cars on the actual ring, it would be when I started working as an apprentice with Kremer Racing. So yeah.
Legendary Kremer Racing. I remember the Jägermeister Porsches.
Oh, yes.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, that's really nice. Your father is a well-known classic car specialist and appraiser. Did he put you into the position to become in the same field or like choose the same profession, or was it totally free for you to decide?
Totally free for me to decide, and whoever knows me would think I wouldn't be happy in the position if it wasn't for my decision. To be honest, I was always into cars, but at the beginning I was going more into the direction of design, like automotive design or product design. So I was always very creative and always into photography and drawing and this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I decided to go down the engineering route and study engineering, automotive engineering and mechanical engineering at university. Because in my opinion, it's a language you need to learn. You need to learn the engineering language. And once you have that in your blood, you can then always add on into different directions. And that was my initial plan. But yeah, I ended up going all the way to engineering because it was really cool. It was really fun at university because I was working at Formula Student. So we were developing cars from scratch with modern technologies, which I'm really into it. My heart speaks all for classic cars, but I'm also at the same time really into modern technologies. So that was a really cool combination. And it was never my plan to go straight to my dad's office after university. It's always my plan to go into development first. Hence why I ended up working for McLaren for a while, McLaren Automotive, let's say that. But what's important is that I always worked at my dad's office since I'm like 15 years old or 12 years old almost. And I always was helping with the forensic side of it. So always these very scientific work and really high-end detailed appraisals and reports. And I really specialized myself in these fields and I always helped with that. And this is the part which I totally missed when I was working for a modern car company. So, yeah.
I would like to jump into the scientific approach of the way you do the appraisals and the fact checking of a car. Let's put it in a very like non-professional way.
Yeah.
What is so different with your approach than maybe 10 or 20 years ago to find out if the car is a proper car, if there's a fake number stamped into or things like this? So what are the instruments you're using today?
One thing on this note, because you just said different towards 20 years ago, maybe. The one thing which has not changed is the approach my father has always taken, and I'm obviously following, is that we're trying to be as objective as possible, meaning that we're trying to use as many scientific ways, which are obviously black and white. So there is no gray in between. You cannot talk your way around it. There is a fact. And from the very early beginnings, so he founded a company in 86, and from the very first day on, he tried to find ways to bring this approach together with his personal inspection of the car. It was like a viewing of the car. And obviously the historical research. So that has not changed. That has just been more and more improved in terms of that we always try to be as upfront with technology as possible. The one thing which we have been using as an example is the material analysis. And the material analysis we use in order to check the elements of each component on the car. Most of the time actually on frames or on body parts. And that way has changed. So since about 2012, we're able to use a portable machine. So I can go anywhere at any time in the world to the car and check the elemental structure of the car, which then helps me to be able to date the material. So I could basically go and tell you whether the car is from the 1950s or the 1930s, or that part of the car which I was obviously examining. And here technology has changed. So before 2012, we were using the same technology, but we were needing to cut out material from the car. So let's say we're checking the frame at 12 spots. We would need to cut out 12 little pieces of the frame. And I tell you what, that's a very, very difficult thing to convince the owner of the car from. But it helped us to then obviously we would send that into the laboratory and they would check the elemental structure or the components, and then we'd be able to tell you whether that fits the delivery year or the Yeah, it's difficult to do it to a year exactly. It's possible, but it's very, very, very difficult. Most of the time, what we can do is to tell you whether it's from the 1960s or 1970s, so for a decade. And then what's very important also is that obviously that's not the only examination we would do. Like we would never ever only say with one of these methods, like let's say this is material analysis, one method. We would never then go ahead and say, okay, the car is original. We would always try to bring in as many validation processes and methods as possible to get an objective opinion on the car. And obviously compare that against the history and the history file on the car and what we see with our eyes. So it's one big puzzle, I always say. So,
and you said the business started in '86, so you must have a massive catalog of information, right?
Yeah, it's huge. So we're doing about 900 inspections a year.
Wow.
So right now we're like, it's 16th of February and we're at, I think, 132. So it's a lot going on. And it's not, we never ever do, in Germany, we call it Kurzbewertung, like very short inspections. So we always go in depth because this is the only way we can guarantee that whatever we actually say is guaranteed and valid. But back to your question, whether we have a big archive and a database. Yes, absolutely. And this is crucial, for example, when we stick to the example with the material analysis, is absolutely crucial. I mean, we can only date a car if we do not have an exact original one next to it, which is already validated by obviously going back to cars we have examined of the same model. And because we've been performing it for such a long time, we're lucky enough to be able to now offer that to our clients, of course. But depending on the case, we actually prefer of obviously taking a second car aside, which we know has been validated, for example, like a museum car, which has been in the museum since day one. I mean, we're seeing it now that many really great historians or garages and really specialists in their field are getting in an age where they really need to think about how they obviously take that information and give it to the next generation. And I think we're approaching a great problem with that. And so the more we share for the people who are interested, the better it is for the whole community, in my opinion, anyways.
I couldn't agree more. And as this podcast is not only there for entertainment, also we see ourselves as little service providers, maybe you could give us a little insight. So maybe you could share your experience. What do people wrong when buying a car? And what are your recommendations to do better?
The first thing, actually, and it's not just the people who are inspecting the cars themselves, it's also often enough people who are buying it, like a dealer or someone. Most of the time, it actually is also already a lack in reading the history file. So there, if you're lucky, there comes a big file with the car, depending on the age of the car and obviously the car itself. But let's say there is a big history file with it. Read it and read it in detail, because this already gives you so much information. And the second thing is, and I know it from my own experience, we're all passionate and very emotional with the car. So please don't go to buy the car yourself on your own because you are enthusiastic about it. You will not see things which are very, very obvious just because you're all like in a bubble and you really just want to get behind the seat or hear the engine or whatever it is which attracts you to the car. And if you have someone who is not so emotionally connected with a car or is not the buyer themselves, they can give you a clear vision on the car. They can point out certain things. So, and I think we have all been there. So this is a very simple trick, but I think it's a tip which helps. And other than that, it always helps to call up maybe the previous owner or the servicing garage or something to find out more about it. Because what you got to keep in mind is that maybe the person who sells you the car has not done their research well enough and have not digged into the car. So whatever they tell you, they think it might be true, but maybe it's actually not. Maybe they haven't done the research themselves, so they wouldn't know if the car would have had an accident or something, for example. So, and please always use a lift. Never ever just examine the car without a lift, because it shows you so much details which you will be missing out on.
Yeah, I could tell from my Range Rover Classic, I should have definitely used the lift. Otherwise, it was a very expensive. The second lift is always the expensive one, because it's the one that happened after you bought the car.
Yeah.
And to all listening, we will add in the description of the podcast a link to the fantastic videos Laura did, these tiny tutorials to prevent you doing wrong decisions while buying a car. Laura, during your studies at University of Munich, you started an internship at McLaren in the UK. You know, McLaren is the epicenter of the modern supercars build, remembering the F1 powered by a BMW engine, where we have the close connection to this podcast again, and other fantastic creations. But is it like, you know, everyone say working at McLaren is like working in an operation room.
Absolutely.
Everything is like damn
so
clean.
True. So true. Although everyone said when I was there, they said it already changed. So it was apparently even cleaner, but like years before I was there. But I was working with development engineering officers. We had like a little workshop there. But if you would go to the production line where, I mean, we all know how production lines are, but this production line is honestly, it's crazy. So it's all white and tiles and everything is clean, and every worker, they have their own tools, but there's always only one tool out. And everyone knows it's all produced by hands, but there is no dirt whatsoever. So it's very crazy, and it's definitely something you need to get used to at first as well. Because I was development, I was also working on the cars hands-on from time to time, and I needed to change my structure of working on the cars as well. But it actually makes it a lot more efficient. It's very cool. And one thing I actually really enjoyed at McLaren, that's why I chose to go to McLaren, is they are entirely focused on engineering. So they want to bring out the best car in the world from an engineering perspective. And then the design gets involved as well.
And I think it all started with the legend of Gordon Murray and McLaren doing
Yeah.
the F1. Did you ever have the chance to get close to F1?
Yeah. They have actually on the way to the canteen, there is...
That's a good start already.
Yeah. I mean, so it's like the most beautiful building on a lake. And when you're eating your lunch, which you're always supposed to eat there, then you're having an overview of the lake. And for me, it was more important the walk there, because you were walking past all the kind of cars. So there were F1 cars, really like the latest editions, but also very early ones. There was the F1 in, I think, at least 2 F1s were there. We had P1s, we had GTR, so literally everything. And then at the end of it, on the left-hand side, you would see F1 working on their cars. So the F1 team, which was really cool. So that was like the greatest walk anyways.
So the walk to lunch is more important than the lunch itself. I really like that.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
You know, listen from another podcast where you were a guest. You mentioned that one of your dream cars is a BMW, if I remember correctly. And
Absolutely.
So tell us more. What about that? What car is it?
I have 2 BMW dream cars. It's a 328, obviously. If we want to talk about dream cars, then obviously the MM. The
Obviously.
Mille version. It's just so beautiful. And I mean, having been able to co-drive and drive a 328, just the normal version, it's such a fantastic car. Like even driving it today, it's incredible fast and it's great. You sit quite high actually if you're talking about a sports car, but it's incredible how it sticks to the street, talking about a pre-war car. So yeah, that of course. And I mean, that would be rather obvious as well as a 507. So, because it's just a beautiful car. I'm all for like long hoods, and it's just such a stunning car. So, seeing that at Villa Desta in front of Lake Como and
Absolutely fantastic. I think Albrecht von Goetz did a fantastic job on the car, because his description is also fantastic about the car, because he was saying that the car should look like moving while standing. And I think he achieved that goal 100%.
100%.
And one of the few convertibles that look good with a closed roof as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And speaking about Villa Desta, I think 2019 must be a very special year for you, because you became member of the jury of that event. How was your reaction when you heard about your appointment?
Oh my God. I was frozen. Literally. Because you got to know the background for me with Villa Desta is that I have never ever had the pleasure or the possibility of being able to experience a Concorso at the villa before, at the Villa Desta. I was always or not every year, but most of the years I was participating at the Villa Erba, the public day on Sunday. And we would travel down to Italy to experience the Bergamo Grand Prix on that weekend. And then we would go to Villa d'Este, which is quite a change of scenery, but it's car connected. And we would view and see the cars at the Villa Erba, which is impressive itself. Like, I mean, that day for me was very impressive. But then now being able to experience a Concorso at the Villa d'Este, and then even as a jury member, I was frozen. I mean, knowing the jury, and there's always one or two people changing in the jury, but the main jury is like, it's the same since years and years, and it's such a high-end jury. Like each member has an incredible business career and knowledge, and being able to be part of that jury was for me very, very as exciting as just being at the Villa d'Este and experiencing the cars there. And to be honest, the really great part about the days at Villa d'Este is that it's less crowded. You have more time to look at the cars. You have less people around. I really, really love the Villa Erba and the vibe of it, and the people being like, and children being like the greatest eyes. I mean, this is me basically 20 years ago. So, but if you really want to appreciate the cars and go into depth and have a relaxed owner talking about the car, which is great because you have the whole weekend for it, that's what's happening at the Villa d'Este. And I think it's so beautiful because we get to arrive on the Friday already, or maybe even some people on the Thursday for the drive. And you have such long times to be able to exchange it. And at dinner, you sit at a big round table next to the entrance, and you get to exchange the stories, and you really get to listen their story and their connection with their car or the car world. And this is what makes it really valuable.
Totally. It's, as we said, it's kind of a magical experience to go there. And as I said, I can only recommend for everyone who's never participated in a Concours of Elegance, consider to apply for the Villa d'Este, because it's really like, it's a very, very good starter into the world of the Concours world, let's say. So I think that's very important. For you as a member of the jury, what is the hardest part of the job?
The hardest part is probably that I don't get to examine the car in detail. Like, only be able to have the car for a short period of time. And obviously, because there are rules which come along as a jury member, and one of them is we shouldn't touch the car unless we ask for permission. But that obviously means that we won't be hands over it. And for me, experience and inspecting a car is always with like feeling the material, and especially like, for example, with leather interiors, or opening the hood and checking out the carburetors, or lying underneath it and checking out the suspension. And we are quite limited in obviously being able to do that. And this is the hardest part. But at the same time, I actually learning a lot from it because I'm training other parts. Like I'm really looking at the car from far away in order to analyze the elegance of the car, which is something I really appreciate because most of the time I inspect the car from a very technical point of view. And it's not that you forget the actual elegance of the car, but it's not in your focus. So approaching the car at a Concours event, that's the first thing you do. You approach it from the distance and you analyze it from the elegance point of view. So I'm training my eyes in a very different way.
Absolutely right. And this is why I always try to be there on Thursday, because seeing the cars arriving in a very relaxed manner, driving on the little ramp, get scrutinized by our colleagues from FIFA, and then having the time to feel, hear, and see the cars moving is a very special moment.
And it's so different to look at the cars really early morning before everyone wakes up, and then later in the evening, because obviously with the sun shining different ways, like different shapes come to mind. So
Yes.
It's very nice.
And there we have a similarity. It's the Dawn Patrol in Pebble Beach, right?
Yes.
So that's
very
really
true.
That's so you have the mist coming off the sea, wobbling over the green, and then you see some sun rays breaking through this.
Yeah.
It's a true magic. Dawn Patrol is also a true magical moment.
That's definitely the must-do at Pebble.
So everyone who plans to go to Pebble Beach for the first time, try to sneak into Dawn Patrol. It's really worth it. I think that makes this event also as magical as it could be. Laura, from your point of view, someone approaching you saying, Laura, I just bought this fantastic car. I would like to participate at Villa Desta. What should I take care of? Where should my focus should be on for bringing a car to Villa Desta? Let's leave the registration process outside, on spot. So what do they have to take care of?
I mean, you need to prepare the car very Concours standard-wise. And there is a difference in restoring a car. There are different standards. And by now, the term Concours restoration has developed. So it's the last 10% of final finishing, which is the important bit, really. That's the one thing we all know almost. But what we as jury members, or at least everyone I've experienced and talked to, really appreciate is if you prepare a history file on the car. So the more information you can bring to the car, and maybe even upfront to the event, like maybe send the file out, because most of the Concours events, they will offer that service at registration. You can send in the file, and because the better we can perform our job. So the more we know about the car and the more you can bring in, the better we can perform our job. At the same time, the more it shows us that you're very well prepared and that you're really into that car.
Yeah, agreed. And we have to add, as a jury member, I would also like to encourage younger people to apply and join us in this fantastic journey through automotive history during a Concours.
Absolutely agree. I often have clients and younger generations of clients as well, and they think I'm not even applying for it because I will never get an entry. And I say, why do you even say this? Yeah, because it's the Villa Desta or it's this and this Concours. And I always say, look, you have a very special car and just apply for it and you will make your own experiences. And I absolutely agree. Participating in these events can seem like from an outside, it can seem very stiff, and it is in certain terms. It's not, you're not on a racetrack and you're not fully going for it and you're not covered in oil. It's a very different scenery, but it is amazing. It's a great atmosphere. You have great talks. Everyone is very relaxed. It's not a stiff, atmosphere. It's a very relaxed atmosphere almost, and in a different scenery. So yeah, I encourage everyone to come, and younger generations are really, everyone is really open to it as well. I mean, I joined as the third woman in the jury member, in the jury group, but certainly the youngest. And I remember how I was feeling. I was like, oh, wow, okay. But I felt really welcomed, and that not only by the jury group, but also by the entrance. So yeah, it's a very, very respectful and very relaxed atmosphere for sure. And fun.
And fun, definitely. I think that's the most important part. It's the fun part on it. And it's not about winning or losing, of course, also to a certain extent, because you do a lot of effort bringing a car. But it's more like, I think the exchange with like-minded people is the secret. With this, we end this fantastic conversation. Laura Kukuk, thank you very much for joining us today. It was very great, and also allowing us a view into a very forensic profession, which is very rare to find. So thank you very, very much. And we cannot wait to see you on some of the events coming up. And also, please make sure you follow Laura on her Instagram account, because that's really a nice travel, as we said, between profession and lifestyle and passion. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Philip. It was a really great talk, and I can't wait to see you again.
Same here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.